Last week we talked about you're giving the kids the whys, and he brought up a story to me. Lakin was about 5 years old, and I was watching him by myself, which was dangerous a little bit at that age, and so I had to take him somewhere. The TV was on. You remember the old News Channel? They're like, tonight live on News Channel 5. So it's all, tonight live on News Channel 5, a woman strips for a cop. And I shut the TV off, and putting the shoes on Lakin. And Lakin, he goes, Dad, what does it mean to strip? And I said, right, we're doing the whys. I'm like, she took her clothes off. And he goes, why would she take the clothes off for the cop? And I went, well, because that way she wouldn't get a ticket. And he goes, well, why wouldn't a cop give her a ticket? And then it all clicked in my head of where this was headed. And I was ill-prepared for whatever conversation we were ready to have. So I'm like, because, I don't know, because he'd want to see I don't know, it'd be her and him, and they have, she has some cool stuff. I don't know. And so I go, just get your shoes on. We'll talk about it in the car. So we get in the car, and I'm like, God, please let him forget. Let him forget. Please, Lord. So I no longer than get the car backing up. He's all, hey, Dad, so why did that? And I'm like, hey, son, you want to go to Disneyland? I'm just trying to get the subject off. We'll go to Peter Piper. We'll go buy a car. What do you want? He goes, Dad, why did he? And I go, because I don't, son, it's because, he goes, was it because of her boobies? And I went, oh my gosh, I put it in the ditch. No, I'm like, probably, yeah, maybe. He's like, do you like to look at mom? I'm like, stop it. No, we're not talking about this right now. I said, no. He goes, well, when do I get to see boobies? And I go, son, not until you're married, a long, long, long time from now. You'll be older. I said, you got to get through school. You got to get through college. I said, you got to get a job. He's like, Dad, I'm not going to get a job. We're going to get money. He goes, I'm going to live with you guys. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm raising a lazy pervert. And I'm like, no. I go, no, you're going to get a job, and you're going to work hard, and you're going to be successful. He's like, well, what am I going to do? And it was a teachable moment. I got excited. I said, son, you can do whatever you want to do. You can be whatever you want to be. I said, the sky's the limit. If you dream it, if in your heart it's something you want to do, and you work towards it, I said, you can be that when you grow up. Son, what do you want to be when you grow up? And without even a pause, he goes, I want to be a cop. So you got to get the kids the why out there. All right. The beginning of chapter 4 we talk about the jar of expectation. And I really we put things into this series, Train Up a Parent, once again, of things that'll prepare them for the future up ahead. So what the jar of expectation is, and it really helps you out, especially if you have lower expectations right now. Remember, we want to raise our kids to a biblical expectation rather than lower expectations to the child. So over the next 4 or 5 weeks, it kind of helps us, in a sense, to be able to give an avenue, a way of helping to raise our expectations. And so the jar of expectation, you have a name on the jar, your kid's name on the jar. It starts off with 5 marbles. It really starts to really take effect about 4 years old, 5 years old, great. You can do 3, you can do 2 if you wanted to. It's just good practice getting there. So they start off with 5 marbles. And then you let the kids know, if you get to 10 marbles by the end of the week, we'll do something super cool. Like, I don't know, maybe it's Peter Piper Pizza. Maybe we'll take you out and buy you a little toy at Walmart. Whatever it is. And realize this, because life is about expectations. Right? When they get out into the real world, if they just meet expectations, right? If they just meet them, nothing great happens, right? But if you exceed your expectations of your boss at the job, if you exceed the expectations of your spouse, life seems to reward when we go beyond expectations. In the same way that when I'm below expectation in my job, then life has a way of punishing that. So it is a good way to kind of get your kids in the habit of going beyond the expectations. So maybe you're starting off and you don't have first-time obedience, and your kid whines, or you have some of these things going on. So you explain kind of how this works, and anytime they go beyond your expectation, they get to put a marble in the jar. Anytime they're below your expectation, then we have to remove a marble. So you let your kid know, hey, this week we're doing first-time obedience. Right? And if you go beyond my expectation, I'm going to give you a marble. So you call them, and they do it the first time, and they do it with a happy heart. Go put a marble in the jar, right? And maybe, but what happens is your expectations are going to be changing over the next 4 or 5 weeks, because as soon as you realize that they can do what you asked that whole week without having to ask them 4 or 5 times, well, now the expectation is that you do that. That's just standard expectation, right? You're doing things without whining. Okay, we did that for a week, so now the new expectation is that's just normal. You just do that. That's how life is. But now, once you get to week 4 or 5 and they're not whining and maybe they're doing what they ask, now they have to go beyond that. So maybe they did something special. They did their chores, but they did extra chores. So they went beyond your expectation, right? They shared a toy and you didn't ask them to share. They just came over and did something really kind or nice for the brother or sister. And you're like, oh my gosh, that went beyond my expectation. Like somebody gets to sit in a special seat in the car, whatever. For us, it was the front seat. And you have a kid that goes, you sit up front this time, And you're like, oh wow, that was really, like you saw something really cool. They didn't have to do that, but they went out of their way to do something great. And so it is an incredible way for you to navigate the next 4 or 5 weeks while raising the expectations within your home and family. But it also gets rid of, so many times kids do a bunch of little things all week and you can't put your finger on it. It's just like a little tease here and a little whine here, and there's nothing you can do. It's not like at the level of any type of discipline or anything. It's just little stuff. But now I have an avenue. Go get a marble. Right? We don't tease our sister. You know that. That's not what we do. And so now you have a little bit of an avenue to be able to navigate in this. And when the kids get down low, they start to want to get some more marbles. So that hopefully helps them with that. Go ahead.
I want to add really fast because there is a theory out there, and I remember after a couple years of doing this, 3-4 years sharing this, some people believe in the not taking something that they already earned. So thinking that it's not necessarily life. Like when you don't go to the job, you don't get a paycheck or you don't get the hours for that day, but they don't take away hours from the day before that you did work. So we're not legalistic, right? Train up parents, not legalistic. So I had one family and they shared what they did is rather than remove a marble, they just made sure that they let the children know, wow, you're whining. It could have been a great opportunity to gain a marble. And so rather than removing a marble, they just said, well, you just lost the opportunity to get one. And then they would put a marble in with the other child that maybe was doing well, and that kind of created a dang, oh, shucks. Understand, we're not legalistic, but this is a very great tool. It's a great way for them to see visually the success or their progression of where they're going with your expectations and just the responsibilities that you've been giving them. So it's a good opportunity with little ones. Obviously, your expectation on them is not going to be the same as with those that are older. But I remember when my 2 older boys, the expectation of making their bed, well, Peyton wasn't at the same level. I mean, he's significantly younger, but he saw them gaining marbles. He saw them getting, progress, and he wanted to join them. So, he'd walk in there and he would, try the best he could to straighten his bed, and he'd throw pillows on the bed, and there's nothing wrong with us saying, good job. And for any of you that are like me, any kind of type A, leave it alone. Let it be made the way they made it, because it's the way they made it. And you're teaching them. Now, obviously, as they get older, their ability is going to grow, and your expectation that their ability grows should grow.
Not my bed making.
No, I know. It's really sad. That's why you get married. I'm just kidding. Someone can make your bed and do it well.
Yes.
But anyway, start now. And they're never too young to want a marble in that jar. They're never too young to take on some kind of job in the house, even if it's feeding the dog or making sure the dog has water or letting you know when the dog doesn't have food. Something very, very small. But start as young as you can. And you're teaching this concept of being proud of a job well done on the inside of them, being proud of what they've put their hands to. And the word's very specific about that we can see a blessing when we put our hands to something. And it's not any different for them.
And I love what you said, because I remember, when my boys get to a certain age where they can hold the door, they're expected to hold the door for ladies. That's just what is expected. But then little Baylor was about maybe 3.5, 4, and we were coming up, and he ran up to the door, and he everything he could to hold it. And I'm like, that was a marble opportunity. Now, I expect the other boys, that's the expectation, but for a 3.5, 4-year-old, that's a marble opportunity because you went beyond my expectation at the most. So it's a very powerful tool. One of the things that it works toward also is responsibility. And I really want to grab a hold of your heart on this one right here. The generation that's around now was not taught responsibility. And we want to make sure as parents that we want to train up kids. I mean, at my company, I have, young ones, 20, 30 come in, and you have to remind them about everything. No one ever taught them responsibility, how to be responsible for yourself. So as parents, what we can do is we can hinder them growing in responsibilities. And what does that look like? It is when we take on everything upon ourselves, so we're remembering everything like we're their app, and I have to go through the checklist of everything they have to do with them to figure out before we can leave to school, before they can go out and play. See, what I've done, though, is in a sense, I've held them back from growing in responsibility because life's not going to do that. The boss doesn't want to remind your children of everything they're supposed to do in the day. You're supposed to be able to work out that part of the brain so that when you get to an age in junior high and you move on to high school and move out into the world, that I can go through my checklist in my mind and make sure that I'm being responsible. So what am I saying? I'm saying, all right, we got to go to school. All right, little Jimmy, did you brush your teeth? Did you comb your hair? Did you make your bed? He's like, yeah. Oh, no, I forgot. All right, do you have your homework in there? Did you? And so we go through the checklist. Right? Jimmy doesn't have to remember anything. Jimmy just shows up, and then every day he forgets, and then they become junior hires like they can remember nothing. It's because we didn't take the time when they were young to teach them to be responsible. So what we tell you to do is just simply go, all right, time for school. Are you ready? And now they have to go through in their mind, okay, I got my brush my teeth, I brush my hair, right? And they go through the whole thing. Maybe you found out they didn't make their bed, and you go, oh, sorry, that cost you a marble, right? As you get to that expectation. And so it helps you in making sure they come home and they're like, can I go out and play? And before you go, well, did you practice your piano? Did you? And you go through the entire checklist, right? And they're like, yes, no, oh, I forgot to do that. Once again, I'm not training them to go through it on their own. Instead, it's very simple now. Simply, can I go out and play? And I would go, or Holly would usually go, can you go out and play? And they go, no, I didn't do my piano. Okay, we'll go get your piano and then come back. And so once again, we're training our children today for what we want them to be able to do in the future.
Is this the part, what we would say is our phrase verbatim was, do you have the freedom?
Yes.
So they would say, can I go to so-and-so's house? And we would say, well, do you have the freedom to go to so-and-so's house? And that was just code for, did you get everything that you need to done to be able to go to so-and-so's house? And here's what I want to say, because we had a house full of men. And I don't want to pick on the men, but I'm going to pick on the men. Because they're kind of laser focused, meaning they think about one thing at a time. And so if you have a rundown for them to be able to get out of the house, you're going to probably get exasperated by boys because they're only thinking, I should have pants on.
That's it.
Right?
Well, not
or
always.
Shoes. I hope
sometimes.
they have shoes too. But
Yes.
You get the idea. That's extreme. But and I had one that this was is exceptionally challenging for him. He was very laser focused, very determined, very thinking on one thing. And so what we did is we developed a little tiny card, and there was a season where it was by his bed, it was in his bathroom, and it literally listed all the necessary things in the morning because that was our biggest time. And so when I said, I don't know, do you have the freedom to leave for school? He would think, oh, I got to check my checklist. And so he would go and check. So again, we're not legalistic, and it's okay for you to give your kids coping mechanism and skills that help them to remember, wait, what is the giant list that my mom has for me to do before I can leave the house? Definitely put on pants. But so again, you can get creative with it, but that come up with your family's saying that triggers in their head, oh, that list of what they need to do to be able to leave.
And you can start at 3 years old. I want to watch a show. Do you have the freedom to watch a show? And you help them. What does that mean? Well, are your toys all picked up? Are we done with this room? Once again, teaching responsibility. All right, virtue number 2. Remember, we're doing the 10 virtues that make up character. And I'll probably say this at every virtue because I get excited about every virtue. So I'm always like, it's the best, most important virtue. Number 2 is the most important virtue. And so it's self-control. Last week I said wisdom, understanding, most important. Yes. You can have all the wisdom and understanding, but if you have no self-control, you will destroy your life. I have to have the self-control or the ability to govern myself. And what we have to do is learn to train our children to have self-control. Kids naturally, and adults naturally, people naturally, right? We gravitate doing what we want to do rather than what we need to do. But we have to raise up kids that do what they need to do so that later they can do what they want to do. Right? I want to buy this thing on credit card and pay 20% interest, right? I want to do that now, and then later I'm upset that I have all this extra interest I have to pay. But that's not what I need to do. I need to be able to have the self-control so that I can govern my life, so later when I have an excess of money because I haven't wasted it, now I can begin to buy the things that I want. So we're training this within our homes and families starting at 0. We're training our children to control themselves, to have a governing thing about themselves, control oneself. And, control my anger, control over my emotions, control over what I say, control how I respond. How many people know in marriage, some of us like control how we respond to somebody upset and control how we act, control in a sense, my attitude when I come around people, control how I respond and how I care. Do I encourage people? Life is about controlling yourself. A great life is a life that somebody's in control of themselves. A bad life or a life that continues to sabotage itself is a life that has no self-control or little self-control. And so we have to make sure that we're building up, and I call it a muscle. Self-control is a muscle. The more that we control ourselves, the easier it becomes to control ourselves. The more we don't control ourselves, right? Joyce Myers talks about that. She talks about 2 dogs. And she says, the more that you give into the flesh is what she calls it, right? That's lacking self-control. The louder that voice is. The more you give into the spirit, which is self-control, the louder that voice is. If you stop feeding the flesh, then the spirit gets very loud, and you have the ability to overcome and to control yourselves in all circumstances. And so we have to make sure that we're building that. Here's one of the big mistakes that I think that early parents, first parents, parents in general can make with a child, where we just let the child touch whatever the child wants to touch, go everywhere the child wants to go in the home, right? We have to put things up high, right? We have to baby-proof all the stuff, right? The cabinets and everything. And the child's allowed to go in any room at any time, never has to sit in a certain place, right? And when you go to people's houses, they got to put stuff high, right? And so then what happens is then now the child goes into kindergarten, and now the teacher goes, hey, I need you to sit here for half an hour. And the child hasn't done that ever. So the teacher finally gets fed up because the kid can't not touch other kids and can't sit in the place. And they say, hey, I think that we need to have that child tested, right? Because I think that child has no, they don't call it self-control, but that's what it is. And it's very unfair to a child. What we have to do is teach our children to control themselves. And we do it through very simple things, starting at 0 that we do that teaches a child to control. So by the time they get into kindergarten, first grade, they've been taught for 2, 3, 4 years of being able to play in a certain area, a certain space for 30 minutes, for 45 minutes, right? And then school begins to take it an hour. Now I got to sit here for an hour and a half, and now I have recess. And so we are building up that muscle of self-control with our children. All right, self-control. You control, and now here's self-control. It's called a transition. The transition means this. We start off in control, and then we slowly give the children control themselves. So there's a transition that happens, that I choose for you until you can make right choices. When you can make right choices, then I give you control, right? So it's an outside in, which then becomes an inside out transition in their life. And I like to say it's like an airplane. So if I was teaching somebody to fly, so you're teaching your children to fly. So I'm in the driver's seat from 0 to 4 years old. You're in the passenger. I'm saying, hey, this is what we're doing. I'm flying. I'm in control of the plane, right? Because bottom line is I don't want you to crash the plane. I can't give a 3-year-old the plane. That's too much responsibility, right? Sometimes parents give their 3-year-old too much responsibility. No, they're not ready for that. I don't give you responsibility until you can handle it. Then somewhere around 4 or 5, it depends. Every kid's different. We're not legalistic. But somewhere around 4 or 5 years old, I move over into the passenger seat, and now you're flying. But I can take control of the plane at any time that it looks like it's going to get dangerous, things are out of control. So this is all the way up to maybe junior high, 12, 13 years old, right? But now here's the thing. Once they get to junior high and high school, how many people know that now I'm on the ground and I'm talking to the plane? Now, if I have not taught you self-control and how to fly the plane, many teenagers crash their life by making horrible decisions because all I have, oftentimes when you go to school, is I'm just on the thing, hey, don't do this, have the right friends, get good grades, go to class, right? This is all that I have. But if I have not gone through the transition of building the self-control in your life, then nobody's listened to me on the ground. And crazy things can happen when they get to high school. So it's very important that as we go through the transition, that we're helping our children not crash their life, right? And on the other hand, also knowing that this is not dictated by legalistic age. Once they're 4, hey, I give you control over this, and once they're this age, I give, because no, I don't give you control over the plane until I know that you can handle the control. Does that make sense? So I'm in control, and as soon as I believe that you can make good decisions, now you can be in control. Right? I don't. There's not really an age limit even for me on this. Because people are like, so what age can my daughter date? And I go, what age can they date? I don't know. Right? If they're 17 years old and they're dating a 28-year-old bum loser without a job, right? You can't handle that responsibility. So I'm going to have to remove that responsibility from you until you can make good decisions, right? If you can't choose good friends, then I'm going to have to choose your friends for you in your life. And so I have to make sure now if you're 16 and you're making good decisions and I feel like I can trust you, then I can give you that responsibility. But we have to be willing to do this. I have to be willing to do whatever it takes to make sure my children doesn't crash their life. Because many people, parents are like, I don't know what to do. You know, what do you do with it? This is, you know, they're 16 years old. What do you do? And, right? I go, no, you don't let them crash your life. Right? Even I'll do so much of giving up the love they have for me to make sure that you don't crash your love. That's how much I love you. You'll hate me for a while, but when you're in your 30s, you'll applaud the fact that I laid down my life and the love that you have for me. And it's something that I saw even my own father do in my life. So at 15 years old, I was hanging out with a kid at church by the name of Mike. Mike was trouble. I knew he was trouble. Everybody knew he was trouble. And my dad said, hey, I don't want you to hang out with Mike. But Mike was cool. Mike was really, he had like tobacco in his back pocket. Like he was really cool back then. I don't know if you knew that. Like he had the little ring on the 501Gs. I was like, he was cool, right? And so I want to hang out with Mike because he was super fun, right? So and he brought cool things, and right, and so right. My dad's like, hey, don't hang out with Mike. I'm done. Don't hang out with him. And then at youth, he caught me sitting in the back. Me and Mike were hanging and goofing off and getting in trouble. So then things got crazy for my life. And my dad told me, right? He told me this. He says, as of right now, you have no friends. I'm your only friend. Be nice to me because I'm all you got. And when we're at church, you'll be by my side the entire time. You'll go nowhere else. I'm the only person you get to talk to until you can handle that responsibility, right? And we did that for a little while. And then when he felt like I'd handle it, and I don't think I ever talked to Mike again. Now, Mike went to prison for 20 years, somewhere when I was in my 20s. So my dad was willing to lay it all down to make sure, because I couldn't handle the responsibility of making good friends. So my dad goes, I'll pick your friends for you, and I can do that for you. How many people know that in the junior high and teenage years, right, great kids can get destroyed by wrong relationships? Great kids, and I have to be willing to say, no. My dad said, so it happened again kind of in high school where I wasn't going to class. My dad found out about it. So my dad is simple, because we'll talk about this when we get to discipline. Discipline is just change direction. My dad knows how to change direction. He just said to me, he goes, here's what we're going to do. He says, if you miss another class, I'll take off from work as long as it takes, and I'll go to school with you. We will sit to class together. We'll go to lunch together. We'll laugh with your friends together. We'll have a grand old time. I loved high school. We'll love high school together. I didn't miss class again because I don't want to go to school with my dad. So it's being able to say, you can't make a decision. Do I need to step in and make the decision for you? So making sure that we are, like I said. All right, so here we go. Teach at 0. One of the things, I'm going to go through some different ages, some things that we do that hinders self-control. So what you find with new parents oftentimes, baby cries, I pick it up. Right? Baby cries, I pick it up. Baby cries, I pick it up. What do we teach the baby? Babies are very smart, very intelligent. So the baby learns that in order for me to be happy, I need outside stimulus, which then can be very hard to deal with in a toddler age, teenage age, an adult age, that my happiness is conditioned on other people treat me in a certain way, and that's not life because people aren't always going to treat you the way that you want to be treated. And so if the child has been fed, the child's been played with, the child's been changed, everything's good, and the child wants to cry, enjoy yourself. Enjoy it. Have a good time. I'm going to close a couple doors. I'll be in the other room, right? And what a child learns in that, even at a young age, once again, changed. Like we're not abusive. Changed. We played with. We had some great time, right? And you just want to cry. I can't pick you up because it's just reinforcing the fact that if you cry, I pick you up. Reinforces it, and that's not what I want as a 1-year-old, 2-year-old, 3-year-old.
Well, the reality is that life isn't fair. People are mean. People exist out there that, people exist that are not nice. Things are going to happen to us in adulthood that doesn't feel great. And so we want to teach our children to exercise that muscle young, that not everything is going to feel amazing and wonderful and fluffy, and I'm not going to always feel good on the inside, but I have the power to make myself feel good on the inside. Now, initially, when something happens to us that's not nice or unkind or hurtful, it zings us. But the word's very specific. We're not to live there. We're not to live in those moments. We're to choose to think on what? Those things that are holy and praiseworthy, of good report. And so why would we not take an amazing opportunity to start teaching our children that at 2 years old, 3 years old, 1-year-old, and redirecting and showing them that it's not the end of the world that thing happened, or that mom had to take that away, or that you have to go to bed. It's not the end of the world. We can have a happy heart. We can look at this and be happy in it. And, sometimes it's just encouraging them. You're fine. You don't need to, why are you crying? I would say to my kid, why are you crying? You don't need to be sad. You actually have the power, smile right now. Or I would actually say to him, don't smile at me. Don't smile. Don't you smile. And pretty soon they're smiling. And then I'm like, see, you have the power on the inside of you. So it's really important for those of you in here who have little ones, start now. Because how many of you can identify with having something happen in adulthood and it blew your world apart? But maybe it wasn't really that huge. Have you ever had someone that was close and they just said something mean and you just thought about it for days and it ruined your week and you were completely ineffective and not productive and didn't put your hand to anything? Well, that's not God's word or desire for your life. And it's not for our kids either. So when we talk about self-control and we talk about emotions, let's be really, really careful that the way as Christian parents raising Christian kids, Bible followers, Bible believers, let's make sure that some of that amazing stuff that we have read is not actually taking a precedent over what the Bible would have us do instead. Let's make sure that as parents, we're being Spirit-led, that we're reminding ourselves that I'm equipped to be the mom to my kids. I'm not necessarily equipped to be the mom to anyone else's kids. I'm the mom to my kids. And the Holy Spirit, God's going to talk to me and give me peace on decisions and give me peace on what I'm doing. And so sometimes we have to become uneducated in all that amazing world psychology and world philosophies and those new programs that are out there. Sometimes we have to, all the time we should be judging it against the Word of God. And it says in the Word, train up a child. I always say train up a parent. Train up a child in the way that he should go. Not the way that you want him to go, not the way that he wants it to go, but train up a child in the way that he should go. And as he gets older, he won't depart from that training.
That's so good. So stuff doesn't make us happy. This is the reality of life. Because I was poor, I was very happy when I was broke, and I'm very happy when I got money. So Paul even talks about that. So we want to make sure that we raise up children who have the ability to be happy in the circumstances they have in life. And I don't know what, right? And we're obviously not talking about moms and dads. You know the difference between a hurt cry, right? I'm sick cry, and I just want to be held cry. We know the difference about that. So we're not talking about the hurt cry. We're just talking about the cry, right? We had, I remember it was on our third kid, and this was in the middle of the night. And we had the baby monitor on. And the kid was at the age now where you sleep through the night, right? You got some oatmeal in your belly, so it's not because you're hungry. And baby started crying, Baylor was crying like 2 in the morning. And I woke up, and whoever wakes up has to take care of the baby. So I would do the little, like, act like I'm sleeping, but nudge her, like I'm like, oh. And then she kind of wakes up. She's like, ah. And I'm like, oh, you're awake. And then she's all, oh, Baylor's crying. I'm like, I'm thinking, well, you woke up first. And so she goes, I got it. All right, she climbs out of bed. She walks over, right, you can hear it in the baby monitor. She rips the baby monitor out of the wall, throws it across the room, climbs back into bed. We went to sleep. And so we never plugged it back in again. So teaching your children, right, at a young age, right, to find and have, you can start it, like we said, at 0 years old. Once they become toddlers, we start kind of at 0, but it really begins to work and take hold at about 1.5, 2 years old. And this is called playpen time, which then moves into room time. So once again, this is preparing them for school, preparing them to sit down. So it starts out like 15, 20 minutes where they get a couple toys and a playpen. There you go. Enjoy. See you later. I'll be back in a little bit. And they learn to play in a small area, and they learn how to get happy with a couple toys and a couple things, which then leads into room time. About 1.5, 2 years old. Now they go into the room. You're right. How long? 20, 30 minutes or so, right? They go into the room, couple toys, they sit there and they play, and then you're like, all right, all done, and you bring them out. And they won't like it in the beginning, but over time they begin to enjoy it. Once again, we want to create creative kids who can make fun, have fun where they're at with a few things, learn to control themselves in a kind of a smaller area because they're going to be going to school one day. And so we're training and teaching them, and then you also do little things with them at 2 when they're sitting down, and all right, you're going to color here, and maybe you plan on you're going to color for 10 minutes or do a couple puzzles, and they want to get up, and you're like, no, Anderson's finished. We always finish our puzzle before we get up, so I need you to finish the puzzle. When it's finished, then we can get up. And once again, we're exercising this self-control muscle of theirs.
Okay, so a couple things. You said playpen. You really dated yourself on that. If we're
Don't
really
we have a
talking
playpen
about,
now? What is it called?
It's not called a playpen. It's called a pack and play.
That's a playpen.
No, it's called a pack
Does
and
anyone?
play.
I want to know a survey. Do you
Okay.
call? Am I the only one that calls
Who
it a
has
playpen?
moms and dads that called it a playpen?
Grandparents. Shucks.
Yeah. How many of you call it a playpen? Okay.
Ah!
Well, I lose.
Not
There
really
you
a
go.
lose. I think it's like half.
Okay.
You kind of lost. It's
Um,
not a loss.
and of course, all of this is filtered through, not picking up a baby when they cry and letting them have their space. It's all filtered through the fact that you had that time. Like you can cuddle with your kid.
Oh,
You
yeah,
can
always
have that time with your child.
You had time. You played with
Yes.
them, but daily, every day,
Yes.
you always made sure that the kids had room time. Always did it.
Well, I'm
There was-
talking about the prior. So now I want to say something about room time. I remember when I was getting my education degree, there was this big theory, or I don't know, this movement where we don't give anything that is like a color page that is outlined.
Yeah.
Like we only give plain paper. We don't want kids coloring within the lines because that stifles them, and that actually, and this, and really in my mind there's proponents of this or opponents of this that disagreed. They said, well, I disagree. I think it teaches parameters, and I think it teaches boundaries. And when you only give a one medium like crayons versus crayons, colored pencils, colored markers, paints, whatever. The idea was, the opponents were, how creative does it take to be if you have everything at your hands, everything at your disposal, as opposed to someone who has a limited amount of medium, a limited amount of tools, if you will, and they have to produce something pretty amazing and spectacular. So the opponents really had my attention. I thought, well, I think someone who can take and play with their fingers and be imaginative it's using a different part of the brain. And so there were these two sides, and it was really a powerful concept. So the idea with room time is that you're saying to the child, there is a limitation. This is a boundary.
It's life.
What can you do within the boundary? How amazing, how can fabulous you spend your time within this boundary? And watch and see that your kids don't rock it. Watch and see that they don't just absolutely surprise you. And then we got to a place where my kids, I would say room time, and they would go in there, and then I would say, room time's over, and I didn't have to put a gate up. I didn't have to, nothing. I would just say, hey, you guys can come on out. And they'd be like, we're still playing. And they would sit in there. And what I've seen develop in these guys is amazing students. I never had any issues with their attention. Never, ever, ever had a teacher say that they're not well behaved or that they can't sit or that they're not focused. That was very, very rare for us. And then readers, like they really enjoyed and then imaginative and then creative. And I saw all these other things coming out of them, all because we required them to have a little bit of self-control for 30 minutes in the day. And then moms, come on, like it's amazing because then you get a break.
Gift.
Yeah, they don't have to be napping, so you can get stuff done.
Time, right? You know, in my generation, we had a different room time. My mom, it'd be in the morning, it'd be 118 out. She'd throw me and Jason out back, close the door, see you tonight at dinner, and that was room time. And we didn't have playground. We just had dirt out back and a spoon. we had like 12 hours of dirt.
But
and a green hose. We drink from the green hose. That's why I'm not 6 foot tall.
But that's a powerful thing. But that is a powerful thing because we live in a generation where technology is now becoming the babysitter.
Right. And be careful with technology. Don't throw them room time and just throw a show on. It's not room time.
Oh, don't do that at all. I think you use that as a totally other different tool for mom to have some break.
Right. Instead, that's a time where they play with tools. All right. 3 things real quickly I want to deal with on self-control. Fits. We don't do fits are annoying. Nobody likes fits. Nobody likes tantrums. Train at home for what you want in public. So a child begins to throw a fit at any age, right? 1, 1.5, 2, 2.5, 3 years old. Very simple because we take something bad and we use it for self-control. So what we've always done is just simply go, oh, nope, Anderson, we don't throw fits in this house. So, all right, let's go to your room. And when they're like 2, you're like, all right, come on, go in your room. All right, now you can come out when you're done. When you're done, you can come out. What am I teaching that child? You can have emotions, you can cry, right? But you don't have to affect the whole world. Do it. And what the child does is it teaches them that you have control over your emotions, that a child can control themselves. And it's funny for everyone. Little Olive, very rare, she's so good. But the other day I had little Olive, and she was a little upset. And I'm like, oh, no, we don't do fits. All right, come on, go in the toy room. There you go. And when you're done, you can come out. And she stops almost instantly. She's like, all done. I'm like, come on out, we're still in grandpa time, right? Come on out of here. And once again, it just reconfirms you're building up that self-control muscle because if they haven't used it, now you're dealing with a very emotional 10-year-old, 14-year-old, 16-year-old, some a 40-year-old because they were never taught to be able to control that emotion.
And you're allowing them to govern when they're okay, when they're ready. Like, you know, it's not necessarily called timeout because
it's not really timeout.
It's not a timeout.
Because you can come out anytime you want.
That's right. It's just whenever you're ready. And so what I loved about it is it just starts to create in them, well, maybe I'm not ready yet. I mean, how many of us can identify with that? How many of you are kind of like, I want to go and, you know, get okay? Right?
No, that's good marriage stuff.
Oh,
Holly will do that. She's like, go to your room till you're ready. And I got to go in there. And I'm like, all right.
But it really, you're so what I love about it is you're not calling them wrong or bad or the behavior. You're just merely saying that you can control that emotion right now. And so I'm going to go ahead and put you over here. Because how many of you know half the time there's a big giant fit going on? It's about the audience. Yeah. It's about how much I'm going to sit and allow it to affect me. But when you remove your audience, when you remove yourself, how much fun is it to pitch a fit when no one's listening? There's an audience of one. And he's got something really serious to say about it. And what's the word say? What does God say? It says you can control that emotion. So all we're doing is we're just giving them that time, that space, and the lack of an audience to get themselves under control and exercise and build the muscle that is absolutely inside of them and works.
And if you start at like a year and a half, a year old, I mean, it's great. Little one, right? You're like, oh, just pick them up, put them in the little playpen, and you just go, all right, when you're done, I'm going to get you out. And I just go stand right outside the door, and I'll remind, like, when you're done crying, Dad's going to come get you. I'll get you out of there. And then they stop, and I go, hey, how are you? Come on out. And we get them out, and away we go. So once again, we're building self-control. Whining. I hate whining. Whining's annoying. I don't have whiners. Anything that annoys me, I get rid of it, right? And so I want to drink of water. I want you to shut up, right? You know, no, sorry.
Oh, my gosh, no.
I don't say that, but I thought it. Right? Isn't it like, and then it's embarrassing. You get out into public and where you go. So it's so simple, right? Holly's a master of this. I don't want to drink water. And she's like, well, whiners don't get water.
Well, or I'd be like, I don't know what you're saying. And that's even more fun and effective because then they look at you like, what are you doing? Have you ever done that like with a 2-year-old and they stop and they're just staring at you and you're like, gotcha.
Gotcha. We can all
You don't
whine.
have to be doing that. Exactly. So I would just start talking like them. And then they'd be like, stop. And I'm like, will you stop? And then pretty soon they do. And so you can pull them out of it, but we do not have to affirm it by giving into it. We
No,
can
no.
absolutely declare, you have more inside of you. You're better than this behavior. And you're not going to get you what you want until you give it to me.
You never give them what they want when they whine, ever. You'll never get it. I'll tell you, I said you'll never get a drink that way, ever. You'll go thirsty forever. So figure out how to say it right. And one of the things you can do, like if it's still not working, is just put a little timer up and go up. When the timer comes off, you can come back and ask correctly. That's simple. You don't have to fight with them or argue with them. And you put a little timer on. In a couple minutes, it goes off, and they come back and they go, can I please have a glass of water? Of course you can have a glass of water. And you'll be amazed at how quickly you get rid of whining and those things. Interrupt rule is a great one because have you ever been out and people have their kids and you're having a cool adult conversation and the kid's all, Mom, 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 Mom. And you're like, oh my gosh, right? And sometimes you get the parent who just does, like they block it out and they just keep going, hey, so anyway, Susie was at the grocery store. And then I'm, Mom, Mom, and it's boring into my soul. I'm like, and then I'm like, Mom, Mom. Like we're all like, Mom, for the love of all that's good and holy, handle this. So we have, once again, it's control. Life is not, here's the thing. Everything that you'll find in Train Up a Parent is the world does not revolve around you because that's not reality when they go out into the world. So I have to make sure that you realize you're a welcome part of the world, but there's going to come a time that everyone doesn't drop the conversation like other people do matter and what other people are doing. You have to learn patience. You have to have self-control to sit there. So we have what's called the interrupt rule, which you teach your children. You go home and make a game out of it. And if you want Mom, if I'm on the phone or if I'm talking to somebody, because that's also, you're on the phone and you hear somebody, Mom, 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 right? And they're like, hold on, and then, Mom, Mom, right? It's simple. You teach the interrupt rule. So you're doing something, the kid will come over, they'll simply put their hand on, oh, I like that. And so they'll do that.
Here, go up in front so they can.
Oh, I thought you said go up in front, and I didn't know what was happening here. I thought it was going to get crazy. I thought it was going to get crazy in this place. All right, so they'll simply put their hand on a reasonable place of your body, and you simply do this. This tells the child, I know you need me, and when I get a break in the conversation, I'm going to go ahead and tend to you. And when they're real young, you have to, right, it's more of just real quickly, like you're like, hey, hold on 1 second. And then.
Well, the other day, Camille and I and Olive, we were in the car, and she was calling for Camille, and I said, hey, Olive, you want Gigi to tell you something? There's this really cool thing. It's a great way to get Mom's attention, and it's called the interrupt rule. And so I said, what you do is when you want Mom and she's talking and she's not listening to you, you simply put your hand on Mom, and then she'll let you know that you know, you want her.
She's 2 years old.
So she goes, Mom.
Well.
And it worked a little bit because Camille's like, yes, Olive. It's
2
very
years
fun.
old, so you're remember, it grows. At 2, you're already starting to do it so that when they're 3 and 4, they're not that annoying child. They've learned to do this. It's so funny. I think it was like just a couple years ago, I saw Peyton, you were talking, and he came up, he's like 18 years old.
He did. He did. That's so funny. We were here. I think he was like, let's go. Stop talking.
Stop talking.
So we wanted to do the interrupt rule.
So, like I said, there's many things in there, but these are the things that everything that we put in the program is all about tomorrow. It's teaching our children to be conscientious of other people, making sure that I realize that other people do matter in this world, that Mom and Dad also do matter, and that in the midst of what we're teaching is training our children to control themselves. A child that grows up with self-control will have a successful life. Amen?
So my big thing, and I'm going to reiterate this the entire 6 weeks, is one of the major goals of Train Up a Parent is that we raise up kids that are not just a joy to us, but are a joy to other people, because they're going to grow into adults who have right relationships. And the word is very specific about our success in life. It's 100% dependent on the people in our life. And so if I'm not raising up children that know that they're valuable, but so is everyone else around them, that's going to raise up someone who turns into an adult who doesn't have the ability to relate correctly. And it's going to affect their ability for massive success because relationship will be something they always struggle with.
Amen.